Shalom. I'm Naama Ru. This is my husband, Rabbi David Ru. And we are approaching the 7th year of a 7-year cycle, the Shmita year in Israel, the Holy Land. And we are looking at the laws that apply to Jewish people in consuming and raising food in the Holy Land during the Shmita year. So we've been talking about vegetables and a little bit about livestock. Where are we today?
Well, last time we were talking about when the things became sanctified for the Shmita year, and we had talked about vegetables and grains, olives, and grapes. We hadn't talked about other trees yet. For other trees, the Gemara that we quoted last time from Rosh Hashanah Yud Gimel Amud Beis says, Amar Rabba said, Amor Revbanan, the rabbis told us, Ilan basar Chanatta, trees become subject to Shemitah depending upon when Chanatta is, and we'll discuss that in a minute. Tevua v'zeisim, grains, olives, and grapes. Basar shlish, it depends when they're a third done. Yerek, basar, lakiita, and vegetables only depend upon when they're harvested. Rashi explains that the reason why Chanatta is important for for trees is because that's when the sap runs, and the sap running is what determines the year for the tree. So the question is, what is Chanatta? So Tosfos and Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Beis on base, and the Rash in his Perush Mishnayos says that Chanatta is after the flower falls off of the tree. The flower has been fertilized, and at its base, a fruit begins to grow, and at that point the flower falls off. In some things, like if you think of an esrog, the pitom is actually the remnant of the flower, and the same is true with a rimon, a pomegranate, and so on. There are some fruits where you see a remnant of the flower afterwards anyway, but basically the flower falls off, and that's the point when they say Chanatta is. The Rambam, on the other hand, says Chanatta is when it comes liable, when it's grown enough that if you harvest it at this point, it would be liable to separate Trumas Meisus from it, which is essentially when it's a third grown. The Chazon Ish, one of the most important people to deal with Shemitah in the last 100 years, the Chazon Ish he says that the Rash says that Chanatta da Amru Hainu Smadar. This is the beginning of the fruit or the end of the flowering. Shabbat Tekef Achar Gemar Chanatta. This comes immediately after Chanatta. But the opinion Amnam Das Rambam, but the opinion of the Rambam, the Chanatta Tehuskaru Hainu Onas Masers, that this is when it becomes liable in Trumas Meisers. And the Chazon Ish said this is when it's about a third grown. Now, for most fruits and vegetables, it would work out to the same thing. Meaning, it doesn't matter which one of these two you use, both of them are before Rosh Hashanah or both of them are after Rosh Hashanah. There are only a few, we're only talking about fruits that grow on trees. There are only a few fruits grown on trees where there is a difference between the two. Avocados and kiwis are two of them.
Growing in Israel, because this only applies to produce grown in Israel.
Right. Who cares what any place else in the world?
Well, we care, but it only applies to what's grown in the Holy Land.
According to the Rosh, Chanatta for both of these would be before Rosh Hashanah. So the kiwis and avocados that we get in this coming year would be exempt from the laws of Shemitah, but the kiwis and avocados that we get in the 8th year would be liable in the laws of Shemitah. And according to the Rambam, it would be the reverse. The kiwis and avocados that we get this year would be liable in Shemitah, and the kiwis and avocados that we get in the following year would be exempt.
And I'll just say, if they're imported to Israel from somewhere else, then
they're not Shmita, unless, well, yeah, they're not. They do not have the sanctity of Shmita, so it would be completely irrelevant. Now, as you go through the Chazon Ish, you discover that he seems to go back and forth whether we paskin like the Rash or the Rambam, and so the minhag of most people is to be strict for both of them. So we treat both kiwis and avocados, both in the 7th year and in the 8th year, as if they had the sanctity of Shmita.
The Chazon Ish, is that like vision?
It's the name of one of his books. All of his halachic works afterward are referred to as the Chazon Ish.
And he lived in Israel?
He's from Lithuania, but he made Aliyah to Israel.
And what were the years that he was?
He passed away in the 1950s.
So it was like he was helping the new Israelis and the ones that were here before to determine the ways to.
He was one of the people that did an incredible amount of work on Shmita and other mitzvahs to Lios Baretz.
And so he's influencing like the rabbis of today in Israel. He's foundational.
He is one of the most influential of those people when we're talking about Shmita and other mitzvahs to Lios Baretz.
Some point, let's talk about who are the ones in our day, right?
The esrog is a problem because the Gemara in Kedushin in Daf Gimel says esrog kiyerek, that the esrog is like a vegetable, because ma yerek darku legadal al kol maim. What's true about the vegetables? They need constant irrigation, and because they need constant irrigation, and if we don't, they die and they cease to produce. That therefore, whenever we harvest them, determines whether they are produce of the Shemitah year or not, and therefore lkiita ato isuro. Therefore, whenever we harvest it, determines what its status for Meiser or Shemitah. Af esrog darko legadal al kol maim. So too, the esrog needs a very large amount of water, constant watering, otherwise it can die. B'shas lkiita so isuro. Therefore, the time when we harvest it determines its Meiser or Shemitah. The Tosefta says explicitly in Shvis at the end of Perek Dalet that whatever is true of Trumas Meisus, determining the year for Trumas Meisus, is also true of Shmita. So even though our Gemara talks about Trumas Meisus, it's also true of Shmita. And this is the Psak of the Rambam, that the Esrog, we determine what its year for Meiser or Shmita based upon whenever it's harvested. Now, the Mishnah in Bikurim seems to say that it is the Chanatta, it is the, whatever that word means, either when it becomes liable in Meisers or when the flower falls off, determines when the esrog becomes liable, what shear it's from, and therefore it would be like all other fruits and not be like a vegetable. In Shabbos Haaretz, Rav Kook writes, "V'yeshamim shebachol inyan ein holchim be'eser gaser achar la'kita." Some people say that in any case we don't follow when we harvest the esrog. V'imnechnat b'shishis din peros shishis yeshlo. And so if the Shannata, if the flower falling off occurred during the 6th year, it's considered fruit of the 6th year of the kol davar. Afilu im nilkat b'shvis, even if it's gathered in the 7th year. And however, the Shulchan Aruch seems to paskin like the Rambam. So the minhag is to be machmer for both opinions with the esrog. Although for us it has no practical difference, because all of the esrogim that we use, for instance, for either in Eretz Yisrael, are used either for food products or for the esrog on Sukkot are harvested before Rosh Hashanah, and therefore for this year they're harvested before Rosh Hashanah of this year, so we don't have to worry about the other opinions. And next year they'll all be harvested before Rosh Hashanah, and none of them after Rosh Hashanah. So according to all opinions, they would be liable in the laws of Shmita. So there's no practical difference. However, it was raised that other citrus fruits might have the same halacha as an esrog because they require vast amounts of water, constant watering, otherwise they don't produce fruit. The fruits on them can dry up if they don't have water, and so on. And Rav Tukachinsky asked Rav Kook about this, and Rav Kook responded that he thought originally, when he arrived in Yaffo, he was the Rav in Yaffo from 1904 until the early 20s when he became the Rav of Palestine. Although during the First World War he was in Switzerland and London, not actually in Eretz Yisrael. So when Rav Tukachinsky talked to Rav Kook about it, Rav Kook responded that when he was first in Yaffo, he felt that all other citrus fruits should have this obligation, but as he looked into it more, he saw that they did grow in a slightly different way. That one of the things that the Gemara says about the esrog is that it can stay on the tree from year to year and to continue growing. Some gedolim are given by the owners of orchards, these huge esrogim like this large, that have been kept on the trees for many years. And
wow.
It takes a huge amount of care to keep them kosher, but so you can't buy an esrog like that. It's impossible. The owners of the esrog orchards grow them for certain gedolim, and if you happen to be one of those gedolim, you get them. If not, just forget it. But
no wonder I never heard of such a thing.
But this is not true of other citrus fruits, and there are enough other differences that I don't remember all the details of it, but that Rav Kook points out that therefore all other citrus fruits retain the status of all fruits, normal fruits, that it's after Shahana when the bloom falls off. And the esrog is the only one that we're strict for both opinions for.
Okay, wait. So just point of clarification. The etrog that we get for this next Sukkot
will be harvested before Rosh Hashanah.
So it's in the year 5781. And then someone gives Truma and Maser?
Yes, they will separate Trumas and Maser before they allow them to leave the pardes.
Okay, and then the ones that are harvested during 5782 for the next Sukkot, next year, not this year, those ones are from the Shemitah year.
Right, so Trumas and Maser will not be separated from them.
And how do they publicly make that Shemitah produce? How do they practice making it?
Well, that's Otzer Bastin. The Bastin pays people to take care of it.
Okay.
And we discussed that in the previous video.
Right. Okay, thank you.